Will please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you all for coming. We have had no requests for public comment on items not on the agenda, so we will move into the report of the Secretary. May I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of our last regular meeting?
I move to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, December 16th, 2020.
Heather, second. Thank you. Any comments or questions about those minutes? Another excellent job by Elaine. Thank you. Anybody find any issues? No?
I did not.
Nor did I. All right, in that case, all in favor? That's 5-0. Thank you. Which brings us to the report of the chair. The only item on the report of the chair tonight is the next town officials meeting, which will be on January 13th, and it will once again be a Zoom meeting. I presume that will be at 9:30 a.m.
That's correct.
As we have been doing.
Yep.
Okay, so a Zoom link will go out to interested board members in advance of that meeting. And that brings us to the
May I add
report.
just one thing to that real quickly?
Please, go ahead.
One of the things that will be coming up at this meeting is that we need to talk about the combined fuel bid that we've done with the towns in the past. So we've worked together to be able to get better pricing. And so when we buy in bulk, obviously we do a little bit better. So that time is up now. So we need to look at that for next year again. So that
Good.
will be part of the work that we'll be doing at that time.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, that is over to you, John.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you all very much for coming tonight. I just wanted to first start off and acknowledge, Chief Moya and Sergeant Lund that are here this evening. The two of them, with Sue and Tony and Kevin Fillion, have been doing a lot of work on a school resource officer. And so to remember, last year we had an opportunity to be involved with a grant through the COPS program. We were fortunate enough to earn that grant, which is really exciting news for us. And so there's a cost-sharing formula for the first 3 years. Part of the concern I think that we all had was that we didn't want to create a police officer within a school. We wanted to create really a community resource person within the school who happens to be a police officer. And I think Tony and Sue and Kevin and both Chief Moy and the Sergeant Lund put a lot of time to kind of creating a job description of what that might look like. And so they're here tonight to talk a little bit about the work that they've done and share the work. So I'd love to open it up to Tony and Sergeant Lund, Chief Moya, and Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin, for joining us. Yeah, great. Folks, so thanks for having us in tonight. Really appreciate it. Happy New Year to everybody. Hope everybody had a nice holiday. So about 3 months or so ago, we were kind of commissioned to put together a job description for what we would envision a student resource officer that we refer to as an SRO in our school building that was really unique to Marshwood Middle School. So student resource officers exist, in a lot of schools and a lot of communities, and we just thought that this was a really unique opportunity to step back and take a look at some of those things that we really, really like about our student resource officer, and some of those things that we didn't think really fit, in terms of what we would envision a student resource officer looking like. Had a lot of great conversation, looked at a lot of different, plans, and so we came up with what I shared with you tonight would be a job description, a district job description of a student resource officer as it would exist at Marshwood Middle School. And the additional documentation is a memorandum of understanding. That's basically an agreement that the Elliott Police Department will have with the district with regard to the hiring of that position, the supervision and evaluation of that position and that type of thing, just kind of the administrative aspects of it. But it mirrors very, very much the job description, that we, were involved in creating together between the school and the department. So I think a quick snapshot of my envision of that student resource officer at Marshall Middle School, and then I'd like to turn it over to the chief to talk a little bit about, his thoughts. But we really, really want to create a collaborative community, school-to-community officer. We are not envisioning somebody standing, on 236 or at the front door with a citation pad in any way at all. We're looking for a partnership with the Elliott Police Department to really help us navigate a lot of those things that are trending in our communities today that are unsafe and not good for students, parents, and staff. Things that are emerging, an FYI, so that we can be proactive about what's going on in our communities. We're looking for a person to be present around at large gatherings, such as when we have voting going on in our school buildings, athletic events, and other activities. A person that can head up informational nights, for our students and our parents. And so we just see this being as a real partnership, and having that legal lens from time to time to be able to use, as we have to make decisions, in our schools and on our property. A very, very busy place at our school. In the morning and the afternoon, we'd ask that they would be very, very involved in that type of thing. But also, really helping us out with creating a very comprehensive crisis response plan in our school building, for evacuations and lockdowns and that type of thing. We've had a tremendous relationship with the Elliott Police Department to date, and I thoroughly look forward to moving forward with that and actually have them present in our building every day and growing that relationship. So I don't know, Kevin, if you had anything that you wanted to add, for the Marshall Middle School?
I think that's perfect.
Tony, can I add something real quickly?
Of course you can.
I would say this whether they were here or not, but I just need to really acknowledge the partnership that we have with the Elliott Police Department. Chief Moya has been so supportive of our schools since he took over in that position, in many, many ways. Sergeant Lund has really acted as a school resource officer for us in many circumstances, and really it was what he has done for us, which is such an invaluable service, is connecting families to community resources. So families that are struggling, families that need extra support, how do we have a person who can help be a conduit for those state agencies or local agencies that we may not be able to have access to, or how do they partner with our guidance counselors to be able to do that, or the JCCOs or what have you. So it's really been a wonderful relationship, and it really has blossomed in the last 4 or 5 years, and that really has a lot to do with those two gentlemen that are here right now. So I felt like it was important to say that.
Chief, I didn't know if you wanted to speak, on behalf of either part of the.
First, thank you, John. That was very nice. I do appreciate that. And thank you to everybody who came together to work on this. I think when, the first time we kind of got in the room together, we thought maybe everybody was going to have a different idea of where this was going to end up. But I think it didn't take long to realize that we were all pretty much on the same page. I think, Sue could hopefully speak to that as well when we were just kind of sitting there. So that's, John, what you're saying is exactly right. I mean, we have recently started crisis intervention, and now with this SRO is kind of just the philosophy of being there to help, right? We're the police, and I know people look at the police in several different ways, but here in Elliott, my thought is, and our mission statement speaks to, bring people to the resources that they need. So this, to me, is an extension of that, is an extension of our crisis intervention, like I said before, that we started. And I looked at this position with a critical eye, because I know, people kind of are saying, is the SRO the right thing? Is it the right thing to have a police officer in the school? And so for me, if you look at the MOU, and you take some time to read it through it, I think that's really special, because I think that's something, a document that I found in a report that was very critical against SROs in the state of Maine. And I wanted to use that kind of as a framework of, okay, how do we take all these different pieces that didn't work and make sure we make them work here while we do this. So I thought the MOU was very detailed. It kind of speaks to how the relationship will go between the school and the police, and I think it's a great document. I look forward to this. Tony, like you said, this is absolutely, police in the school, it's all part of the community, and we really need to just be together and work together and as one. And this is just a really, really good step in that direction, in my opinion. Ron?
I second that, Chief, resources that we have to share that with the students, family, and staff of the middle school. Thank you for your support.
John, I just wanted to add too, you know, I mean, our schools, you know, at any given time, you know, we can reach a capacity of close to 1,000 people on campus, you know, at different times. And they're very, 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 very busy places. And a lot is going on. There are a lot of students coming and going. There are a lot of parents that are coming and going. There's a lot going on our school properties. And, you know, the job of a principal and administration in our district has changed a tremendous amount. The job has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, but so has the crisis prevention, the proactive crisis prevention, you know, on our school campuses. And that's really another part of what we're trying to look at, is how can we be most prepared for all situations, you know what I mean, as we do have large crowds, you know what I mean, and a lot of activity going on from a very diverse, you know, population, you know, all good, but it's, we need help managing that, and that really is an aspect that the SRO's position brings to the building. And as I said when I started here tonight, this will be unique. This is going to be what fits best for SAD 35, but also what fits best at Marshwood Middle School. We'll beg, borrow, and steal from all the things that have worked really, really well, and then we'll create our own procedures and protocols around those things that suit us best in these communities, you know, for our students, you know, staff, and community. So that's about all I would say, unless you have any questions.
Sue, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah. It was a pleasure working with everybody, and I have to say I was probably the person who went into this a little bit like, do we really need an armed officer at our middle school? This is Elliott, Maine. It's like one of the safest communities, but you know, as I read through a lot of stuff, a lot of reports, a lot of articles about this, you know, before we started meeting, and but I was really encouraged by Chief Moya and Officer One's ideas about this. It wasn't, I think the negative situations have come when it's kind of been a law enforcement position versus a community position, and I was very strongly like, this has to be community, and it came together great. And you know, in light of the climate in the country today, you know, I think it will present us with an opportunity for kids to see what community policing really is and can be versus what they see on TV every day. And what they see, you know, not only on the news, but in shows that they watch or movies. It's like a good way for them to see what really happens and have a relationship that isn't adversarial.
I think you said it. I mean, we are in a relationship business, all of us. And it's about building those relationships, you know, so when in the time of crisis, we have those relationships in place. Our next steps would be, we would review the MOU, you know, just if there's anything that we have any questions about, and we would communicate that back and forth and be able to work out any of those details. And then we would post the position. And then once the position is posted, we would create an interview committee where we would really want to get a real diverse group of people together to be able to help guide us as to what we're looking for in that position. So we'll make you aware of that once we're at that point, because certainly we want to include someone from the board in that committee as well. So
It was a pleasant surprise to see, in addition to the job description, that we have a memorandum of understanding document. I think that's really useful. I wondered if it would be worth our while to look into if we don't already have one with the South Berwick Police Department as well.
we have a document. It is not nearly as detailed as
Yeah.
these documents.
That's
right?
one thing that I think came to light
Yes.
in this. We realized, wait, we need to kind of look at the high school
Yeah.
one when
It
we
might be
read
worth-
that in our process.
It might be worth revisiting.
Yeah.
I think we do need to.
Well, I think we're blessed with an officer that has really done a nice job here and that has really established trust and rapport with the student body, but he may decide that this is what he wants to do for the rest of his life, and...
Well, that's been kind of a constant theme from our Wednesday meetings, is that I think there is a fear that in the next 4 to 5 years, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like there may be a pretty major turnover with retirements in the South Berwick Police Department. So
Yeah.
I think anything that we can do to kind of establish philosophically what we
Yeah.
want to do would probably make a lot of sense right now.
Yeah,
Now,
I
this
agree.
will give us a good start to what we need to do to revamp
Absolutely.
that one, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this, actually. I think it's a great opportunity for us to take a proactive initiative in prevention, like bring back the programs like DARE. You probably all experienced that in your youth, or maybe not too long ago. And just, exposing our children to preventative education. I think that's definitely something that we could do more of, and it sounds like this position might be key in the middle school level. So thank you very much for your hard work on this.
The one thing that I would say, and we talked about this probably 2 months ago, kind of when we were getting to have these conversations, but I think we all feel that we are not going to fill this position until we have the right person.
Good.
And that is the most important part, is that we need the person that works for us. This is an opportunity to create some role models, for our students. It's an opportunity to create relationships, and getting the right person is critical. If that means we need to get a person trained in order to have the right person, then we'll do what we need to do, but it's the person who's going to be critical. Would you agree, Chief?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
I think that Chief Moya said that all along. It has to be the right fit.
All right, well, thank you all very much. I appreciate
Yes.
you all coming this evening.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you,
for your
everyone.
hard work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. Thank you. Exciting.
So the next on the agenda is talking about the board recommendations for COVID-19, and I'm going to throw a curveball at everybody, and I apologize for that. But there has been some learning that has taken place over the last 12 hours that has kind of thrown a little bit of a curveball. So let me kind of explain. We had a situation at Central School before break, and in that situation, we had 3 positive tests, which had always meant to us that we would be in an outbreak status. And originally, if you go back to the original document, it said if you were in an outbreak, everybody who was a close contact was out for 14 days, and then the entire school could possibly be out for 14 days, and they could not return until they either have had a negative COVID test, or they quarantined for 14 days. And so when we had the situation at the high school, rather than asking 800 students or 700 students to get tested, we went with the safer route of saying the 14 days, because the testing may not be available for those people, and there's a financial impact for everybody, so that we felt like that was the best thing to do. We learned with the Central situation that having 3 positives was not enough to institute a outbreak. It was actually having 3 PCR tests. So we had 2 PCR tests and 1 rapid test, and that did not qualify as an outbreak. So that changed things a little bit, and so we had to change what we were doing, because we had just basically been telling people, go get tested, and we would get kind of the results of a test, and if they got an antigen test, or they got whatever testing it was, we didn't really question that. But now we've had to become a little bit more detailed in how we communicate with families. So that was kind of the first sign that things were changing a little bit. So over the vacation, we had a number of cases, which none of us were shocked by, but we were sending out our letters as we always should. And our understanding was that school wasn't in session, so we weren't really dealing with an outbreak situation. And so, in fact, I think I communicated that in I think it was the December 31st letter. I said that, for clarity, a little bit to me that I wasn't clear, I guess. But today, on Monday, we got a phone call from the CDC saying, hey, look, you have fast approach outbreak status at Marshwood High School. And so all of a sudden, there's a rock in your stomach saying, wait a second, what does that mean? Does that mean we have to be out for 14 days? And so what they were this is where kind of things changed. What they have kind of done now is they've pulled apart the 2 things. And they're saying, if you're in an outbreak, how you deal with it is going to be up to the school. It's no longer, we recommend you're out for 14 days or everyone gets tested. So the 2 things used to be married. So being remote and the outbreak used to be married, and now they're not. And so just because you're in an outbreak now does not mean you necessarily need to be out of school. And then the CDC today, and I'm going to paraphrase, basically said they are not going to recommend that we close schools. You're typically not going to get from the CDC that, hey, look, you're going to close for 14 days unless there's extenuating circumstances. And so what they said is they're finding what most schools are being advised to do now is take the time they need for the cleaning to be able to do the deep cleaning in the building, and then have remote during that time, and then bring people back. So if you remember with the cleaning, we can do a deep cleaning of the entire building, or we can leave the building vacant for 7 days. in order to do that. So that seems to be kind of the trigger point, but that isn't necessarily even required. It could be 1 or 2 rooms that are clean. So things have changed drastically. So I can no longer say, when I created this document, it was clear to us that it was 14 days, but I can no longer say that that's the parameters that we're dealing with anymore. So I am hesitant to have the conversation with you tonight because I haven't been able to process how this changes these recommendations, because it's not the same. And so we could very easily say, look, if we get 3 positives, we're going to go out 14 days because that's what we've said all along, right? That we could say that. But what I'm concerned about, and I have to process through a little bit in my own brain, is that we've told people that we're going to follow what the CDC says. And so now the CDC path has kind of changed a little bit, and so we've got to be able to apply that to our schools to see what that really means. Right. So I just want to be careful before I take this next step because I feel like I feel unprepared after the conversation today.
Sure.
On top of everything, we had kind of a new dynamic that we had talked about a couple of times kind of in passing, but hey, could you imagine if due to close contacts, there wasn't enough staff members to be able to run a building? Oh, we got out of that. It was close one time. Fortunately, we got out of it. Well, we didn't get out of it this last time. And so we had 12 staff members that were close contacts. And so at Marshwood High School, with 12 staff members, you can't take those people out of the pile because it's not like every class was affected of that one teacher. So that teacher might have 4 classes in a given day. One of those classes had a close contact in it, so that class would be out, but the 3 other classes would be in. So like even if you pull somebody out, there's still gaps all over the place. Whereas at the middle school, if a teacher is out, they see the same kids, and so all those kids would probably have been affected. So the cohorting is very different at the high school. We've talked about that before, but this is where it really becomes different. And so what the CDC has said is they're finding that a lot of schools are running into the same issue, that it's about the close contacts for staff, where they aren't able to provide the flexibility. And so we planned for that, and so we hired monitors, we hired long-term or full-time subs to be able to deal to a certain extent. So like we might be able to handle 4 or 5 teachers being out, but we can't handle 12 teachers being out. And so that was why we went out. So then there's people who hypothesize as to what happened. And I just want to be really clear about this. This was not about someone making a bad decision. It was not about, there was something on Facebook about there was a party or something. That's not at all what happened. I mean, so just remember, a close contact really is a person in a classroom for greater than 15 minutes cumulatively over the course of a day. Everybody in that classroom is a close contact. So you think about that standard within a school building over the course of the day, very easily how numbers can escalate. So there was not anybody did anything wrong. It's just part of, in this situation, just how the flow of the day worked. So I just want to be able to put that out for everybody to understand, like that's where we are right now. And so at the high school, we are going to be out until Thursday the 14th. And just for clarity, that's because of the staffing issue. It's not because the building is closed. And so when we had the outbreak before, it was because the building was closed at that time. So that's why we're here this evening. That's why staff can still come in and access the classrooms. But the issue is that we can't, if we have all 300 kids in the Monday, Tuesday group come in, we can't provide supervision for them in the individualized classrooms like that. That's an issue that we can't have. Because remember, even if the teacher is out, we have to have someone supervising those students. And so for every teacher that's out, we have to have a one-to-one. And so one of the questions that you think about real quickly is like, well, if every kid's learning remote, why can't we put 65 kids in the auditorium, space them out 6 feet apart, and then we can provide instruction remotely for everybody? Well, you might be able to do that, but the problem is if anybody was sick in that, you have a cohort of 65 students. And so like it can spiral very quickly. So I think in an effort to keep safety at the forefront, that's what we had to do. So things have certainly evolved. I want to have an opportunity to kind of talk to my leadership team about this a little bit. My gut feeling is that, as we talked about I shouldn't say my gut feeling, what the CDC has said to us very clearly, and they've said it over and over again, is that schools are safer than the communities. So the spread in schools is much less than the community spread, which I know they have the data to support that. So I think there's that piece of it, and there's also the piece of, how do we keep everybody safe, and then how do we also be able to staff when people are in the building. So there's some variables now that are a little bit different. From my perspective, I liked it better when it was clear that the CDC, if this happens, and so now it's not that way, and it puts the pressure on me to make that decision, which is, it is what it is. But I just kind of want to give you a sense of where we're at right now. And that's why I feel like I would be better prepared. I don't know, the parameters have changed, so the three options that I provided you don't make as much sense as they did a month ago. Does that make sense to everybody?
It does.
Totally.
Questions?
Do
So-
they still, so like, are you saying that over break, winter break, those cases that were positive while school was not in session did count toward
Some did.
being, okay.
And
So what will happen, say, in February, if there's positive cases in February, do they count, but nobody's in the building, does that count towards the numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
The key is, and this is where some of the new learning also, is that it's 14 days within that window. So if someone tests positive, let's say today, they go back 14 days. And so if they were in school within that 14-day window, then that would count as it. So we had a lot of like 11, 12s, 13s.
Right.
Just because the way we didn't have a full 2 weeks off at the break. So therefore, that's why it still counted.
Okay.
And that was a little bit of a change, because when we do the contact tracing, we are advised to go back 48 hours.
Right.
So we go back 2 days, not the 14.
Yep.
And so really, if you have a positive test, there's a 14-day window beforehand, and then there's a 14-day window after they're identified. So now you're talking about a 28-day window for every case. So that's where the overlap occurs.
Okay,
And that was the new learning.
okay.
And again, Judy, Tawny, managing this at the high school, they've been fantastic. I mean, so we had a long conversation with the CDC. The person who is now running the program was fantastic. And just, I think what they realized kind of as we went through it today, that the standing operating procedures that they created in September and have kind of evolved, what they're doing isn't necessarily fully reflective in what's written in the document right now. And so I think it's important just to be able to kind of get the document real, because we follow it like, it's the rules to monopoly, right? That's how we have to play it. So
I'm just a little bit confused on one thing. So 14 days previous, does that mean contact tracing now has to go back 14 days?
contact tracing doesn't have to go back 14 days,
Okay.
but the outbreak calculation goes
Okay.
back 14 days. So the contact tracing still goes back to 2 days.
2 days.
But the calculation for the outbreak goes back 14 days, which is,
In terms of them being included in the number.
That's
The
correct.
window for the window
yeah,
for what
exactly
it's
right. So
considered.
that's the curveball. That's the curveball.
Wow, okay.
Still finding.
Now, but here's the
Mind-boggling.
here's the part that's a little bit confusing, is because then we had a break, and so like part of the recommendations are to clean the building, but we don't have to, we clean it anyway, don't misunderstand, but we haven't been in the building for
Right.
that period of time. So like it's just, so there was some uniqueness to this falling amongst the break as well.
You go to the doctor's office, they leave the room set for 10 minutes. They don't leave it for a week.
Right.
So I'm just, because I'm a little slow, like a little kid, suppose one of us tested positive. Would we all be considered close contacts, even though I can't even see who's back there?
I stayed at the Holiday Inn Express last night, but I am not a doctor. Let's put it that way. I'm going to give my best answer that I possibly can. I would hypothesize that if one of us were to have tested positive, let's say, I think all of us would have been close contacts. Probably those in the audience would not be, because they're so far apart.
Yeah.
But so my question today was, okay, so if I have a cafeteria and we're not using it for lunch, if I put the desks 16 feet apart, can I eliminate contact tracing altogether? Is there a magical number that's the distance, saying if you are in a large room, not a classroom, because a classroom, it says, doesn't matter if you're sitting on this side of the class or this side of the class, if you're in a classroom, you're close contact. But if we're not in a classroom anymore, we're in a big room, we're in the gymnasium.
Right.
Is there a number that we can be apart to be able to avoid the contact tracing? Because if that's the case, let's try to spread things out even more if we can, and there is not an answer to that. What they say is that they would deal with it on a case-by-case basis. So there is a little bit of confusion for me in that you can be on a school bus, have two windows open in the back and two windows open in the front, and no one would be a close contact on the bus. Maybe the person, if they were closer than 6 feet to the person, like a
Right.
family member or what have you. But the vast majority of the bus wouldn't be a close contact, but a classroom would be. And so that's a little bit confusing, and that was.
And like this situation, you're a lot closer on a school bus. I'm like, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the part where it keeps evolving, and they're learning, you know. I think what my sense is also is that they really have had to pull back and be able to manage things, and really the schools have had to take over kind of what the day-to-day looks like. And so we're very fortunate with our nursing staff, but this is a little bit different, and so, you know, it has evolved, and I just think I want to measure twice, cut once, I guess is what I'm trying to say here, just to use the old adage. Other questions?
So the piece of this that's vastly more complicated now is what are the factors that lead to the decision to shut down a building for 10 days or, right?
Well, the first part is you're 100% correct about. The second part is it's not even 10 days now. It could be 1 day, it could be 3 days, it could be 5 days, and that's the part like I can't get my head around as far as like, if it's for staff, we know if it's staff, then it's a 10-day quarantine. That number makes sense to me, but it could technically be we would close down for as long as it takes to clean 6 classrooms. I mean, that could, you know, to deep clean in 6 classrooms, that could be a day, it could be 2 days. Where I get even more concerned is how do you handle an elementary school? Because do you go through the effort of getting remote learning set up for 2 days? You know, because like that's because it's going to take, like, at an elementary school, it's going to take a day to get things up and rolling, right? And then it's going to take a day probably to make sure the kids have that technology and the technology is working. So the time that you do that, you're back in school. So don't misunderstand me. Like, you know me, I want to stay in school as long as we can, as long as it's safe. But like there's some practicalities now of like, this feels differently for the elementary schools, whereas the high school and middle school have a little bit more flexibility. I think one of the questions that came, you know, that was asked is, why did we not have school on Tuesday? Why didn't we just go remote? And part of that is that, you know, as you know, we talked about providing the teachers the time to be able to do that, so we have provided that for the high school staff now. But I also think ethically it was, you know, teachers are going to get that message at 9 o'clock at night that they didn't know anything about this, so they got the email when, you know, when the mass email went out, that's when they got that. That's a really big ask for people at that point in time. And so that's why we did it. I think I understand people's concerns. I mean, the vast majority were positive about it, but at the same time I understand. I was concerned about when I wrote it. I mean, I'll be honest with you, that was something I was worried about. And that's why I kind of, when I wrote an email to explain it to you, all of you, I kind of gave you the reasons as to why I made the decision that I did, but that is kind of a curveball.
Well, you said from the beginning, you promised staff they would have a day.
Yeah.
Right? So
Absolutely.
I think you just followed through on, you know, at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important that if you say you're going to do something, that you follow through and do it. And you know, I talked to Rich Luciano, who's the president of the QEA, who has been fantastic. And I think one of the things that if I had to go back and do it all over again, so as Rob Scully would say, the next pandemic, I'll know better. I think when we said that we were going to give teachers some time, I think we all envisioned, okay, middle of October, the whole school is going to be out, and we're going to, kind of like what we did in March, you know, we're going to take a couple of days to kind of get our feet on the ground, and then we're going to go from there. I don't think we ever envisioned it was going to be kind of this trickle down, you know, one school at a time, which is very different than I think than I had originally had in my head, and it's just you know, it's evolved to that now.
Which is why I think, for me, I think it bears really considering the high school is sort of this independent thing, because I think as community spread increases, there's going to be more instances of, or likely be more instances of many teachers affected, just because case numbers are higher, even if it's not because it's spreading within the school. So I feel like high school is sort of set up that you can just go out and you don't lose as much tech issues and kids trying to childcare and all these other things that go with the younger grades. So I think it does bear considering the high school is sort of its own thing. And it's a lot for kids to then have to be out, like quarantined from regular life for 10 days because they were a contact that was just sitting in a math class, even if they were more than
Yeah.
6 feet apart.
Absolutely.
And so then you have more, I think, more kids that are wanting to be fully remote, but parents who are committed to sort of wanting to stay where they said
Yeah.
that they were gonna go, but it's starting, the reality of the in and out and in and out, and as cases go up, the reality, just statistically, that you might end up in a class and then your close contact is higher, not from a school spread perspective, but just as the community numbers go up.
Absolutely. And so Jen, I'm so glad you mentioned that. So Rob and I had a conversation, and so what we will be doing, and the date might be wrong. Let's just say it's January 12th. I don't know whatever the date they come up with as a leadership team here. But they're going to send a communication out to high school families and say, folks, the goal of giving people the choice was to be able to have people who wanted to be remote, and those people who wanted to be in person, to be in person. That was the goal. What it has morphed into now is people fluctuating back and
Right.
forth on the day-to-day, and like that is affecting our quality of instruction at this point, and that's a fact.
Right.
And so what our plan is right now is that we are gonna say, here's the line in the sand. If you wanna go remote at this point in time, we 100% support that. That's your decision. We're gonna allow people to kind of readjust. If you wanna come back, we 100% support that. We're gonna allow people to readjust. But we're gonna allow people to kind of recalibrate. So let's say, because there's a lot of families who feel like, well, we made this commitment, I wanna stay on there. And so at this point, we need to say, look, we said we were gonna give you a choice. This is the time for the high school to make their choices. The other 4 buildings have already done that.
Yeah.
So the high school has got to say, this is the date, here it is. Because right now, this fluctuation is really hard on everybody.
Yeah.
Now, the only hard part with that is what happens in April if things are so much better and we can bring people back? Well, I would much rather have to solve that problem than the
Yeah.
problem we have to solve right now. So
Right.
we'll deal
For
with
sure.
April. You know, we're
And
gonna
when
ask
April
people,
Do it, it comes.
we're
And
gonna
who
ask you to
knows?
kind of hold
Right.
off to the end of the year, but you know what? If things get really good, I will be the first person to say,
Yeah, come
open the
on.
doors, take the
Yeah.
masks off, let's go, you know?
Yeah.
But we're not there right now. So that's where we're gonna be with
Okay.
the high school. Because the cohorting at the high school is extremely difficult because, as I said to you a number of times, if we kept kids in the small cohorts, they were gonna lose the electives
Yeah.
Right.
that they
Right.
had. And so like, that's the tricky part. So at the middle school, if you have a student who's not feeling well, you might have, you know, the 7 other kids in their cohort plus the 4 teachers, and that's very, very different than if you have one student who now goes to 4 classes, sees 4 other like so there's a much
Right,
bigger
bigger circle.
spread of
Yep.
what that looks like here at the high school.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
and I hope I am not trying to shirk my responsibilities. I need an opportunity just because this is very different right now, and there's a lot more. I felt like when I was little, we used to go to the bowling alley and they pulled the bumpers out, and so the ball would kind of go down the lane, but it couldn't go in the gutter. And so like when the CDC had kind of the 14 days, like we kind of had like, here's what the gutter looks like, right? You know, and that's gone now. And so I think I've got to be able to say like I've got to be able to develop something that makes sense that if there is a case, what would it look like? Because I think families deserve to know that. Like, you know, if this is how we would handle things going forward, and this is going to be a little bit different, so it's going to take a little time to be able to put that together, I
Of
think.
course.
One more thing, John, you might not know the answer to this, but so are they recommending now as far as testing that you get a PCR test? Are the nurses requiring a PCR test, I guess I would say, to come, I know that a negative test can't get you out of quarantine, but after 7 days,
So no one's required to have, so
a PCR as opposed to a rapid, I guess, so if,
we are recommending that if people are given the choice to do the PCR test, because that helps
It's
us
more-
when we calculate.
Okay.
But we can't require it, and I think that's one of the other tricky parts, is that when the CDC uses their language, they don't ever use the word require.
okay,
And so now, if we had I'm gonna go back to what September said. September would say, hey, look, Marshall High School is gonna be closed down. If you wanna come back early, you have to have a test, unless you're a close contact. If not, you're gonna be out 14 days.
mhm,
So they've taken that off the table altogether.
Totally.
So literally, now, if we wanted to, we could say, you know, we're gonna close Marshall High School for 2 days because we're gonna do a deep cleaning, and then everybody can return except for those kids that were close contacts.
okay,
So very, very different. But they're not, you know, required to get a test anymore, you know, to kind of even that 10-day quarantine.
okay,
So it has changed.
okay.
So
But if we count the test, so if we're saying, say that you make up a new framework, and you say, let's just say you say 5 cases in the school now instead of 3.
Yep.
Will those be 5 cases based off a PCR type?
I think what we
Language.
could say is that if we were in outbreak status and we had X number of cases in addition to that, we could say, we could call whatever we want, because
Okay.
at that point, it's up to us.
Okay.
And they're not gonna,
You don't have to have.
no,
yeah,
I
you
think,
don't have to have the
I
answer.
think rightly, rightly or wrongly, it depends on what side of this conversation you come on. I think the CDC is doing whatever they can to keep people in school.
Right.
They want to keep people safe, but I think their goal is to keep people in school. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I think that's
Proven
what's,
safer.
Yep.
that's exactly what they're saying, that's
Yep.
safer. I think that's, and I was very clear. I said, look, you've got staff that are scared to death,
Right.
and it's the amazing thing about this is that we can have this conversation 100 times, and every one of us thinks we have it until it happens to us, and so like I would have conversations with superintendents, and they would be kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, no problem, and then 2 weeks later when it happened to them, they're like, wait a second, I never thought of it. This it changes your perspective of everything.
Right.
Because there's just so many variables that go into the conversation. So, that being said, again, I'm not a doctor, but I would hypothesize over the next week we're going to see a lot of numbers again.
Yeah.
People are kind of coming back. Testing is kind of starting to return right now, and so this will be an interesting. For me, when I mapped up the school year, that January to February vacation is the part that scared me or concerned me the most. I think that I think once we get past February break, the vaccine may be a little bit closer for people. We'll be able to start being able to get outside maybe in March. So I think we're starting to be able to kind of get back to some normalcy there. This is going to be the tricky part to navigate for the next 6 weeks. Awesome.
Good.
Let's go.
Woo.
Is everybody okay with that? Does that make
Yes,
sense to everybody?
absolutely.
Yep.
Makes perfect
Okay.
sense.
Okay, the next thing on the agenda is just kind of a quick update. I asked Peter, Dr. Harrison, to kind of share with us kind of an update on the EES pipe breakage. So just to remind everybody, we got a phone call on Sunday, December 20th, that there was a pipe breakage in one of our kindergarten classrooms. And Peter can kind of give us an update of where we're at.
Sure, thanks. So we had a fire and now a flood. Quite a welcome here to Marshwood. But yes, on December 20th, we received word from one of our teachers who was in the building on that Sunday. She reported that there was water, a broken elbow on a pipe in one of our kindergarten classrooms on the 2nd level. So as a result of that, she contacted Mike Butterfield immediately, who's our custodian. He reported to the scene and investigated it, found that on the 2nd floor, the kindergarten classroom, there was flooding throughout the classroom. And as a result, the water went down through the ceiling and into the ground floor. It created flooding in the secondary pre-kindergarten classroom, as well as our special ed classroom and the hallway that leads into the cafeteria. So it was just a mess. We had ceiling tiles that had fallen due to the heavy water and so forth. So it was a real mess. Mike did a great job responding. He contacted specialty services who came in immediately and inspected the boilers, made sure that the heat pumps were off and that the boilers were inspected. He contacted ServPro, which is a water damage restoration service. They came in, inspected, assessed, and decided that they needed to vacuum the water up and placed dehumidifiers throughout that lower level space and in the kindergarten classroom on the 2nd level. So that led us to make the assessment that we had to close 2 of those classrooms. We closed 3 of those classrooms. The kindergarten classroom was the only classroom where students and the teacher were impacted. We canceled school for those kindergarten students, about 10 of them, for the 21st, December 21st. Personally called each of the parents or a parent within the family, or emailed them if they didn't answer their phone to let them know of the situation. They were great, understanding. And the students, as a result, were out on the 21st, and things were cleaned up. The companies that came in did their job, and our custodial team went in, made sure that everything was thoroughly cleaned, and then that kindergarten classroom resumed classes on the 22nd.
Wow, that's pretty good.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they did a great job.
How much loss was there of just like materials and damage to stuff that's important to the teachers and the students?
You know, it wasn't too bad, really. We get in there fast enough with the dehumidifiers and the vacuums, clean things up. There was minimal damage. Certainly the ceiling tiles were damaged, and you know, there were some little things that I think that will need to be replaced, but it was minimal.
Excellent.
Wow.
I will tell you that there is a teacher in that building who had to deal with, Peter was joking about the microwave that caught on fire. She was the one who took the microwave and threw it out into the yard, which is awesome. As soon as I heard it happen, I knew who it was. And she was also one of the people that was affected by the flood, and she was like, no problem, we're gonna move down to the cafeteria. And just talk about just a superstar, you know, all of them, just a really kind of.
Was the same teacher?
Well, yeah, same teacher. Her classroom was affected by it all. I mean, just kind of like, she was kind of like, yep, no problem. We're going to go down here. We're going to make it happen. And just, but all of the staff was fantastic. And I just, Mike Butterfield, Eugene, really just, I can't express enough. I mean, the fact that they probably put in, 20 hours of overtime of having to kind of come in and getting that building ready to go and safe for everybody, of just the hard work that they do. I mean, there's, Serpro comes in and kind of takes care of the the water issues, but they don't clean everything up,
Right.
and so just the pride that they take in that building, just such a sense of community. And Peter, on a Sunday afternoon, Peter drove down, we were there talking to Mike and just had everybody there. So just really, truly a community effort. And again, as I said, the staff was fantastic. Just kind of, we were able to kind of move on like it really wasn't anything different. And, we were insistent that we are back in school on Tuesday. There was some time crunch for specialty services, getting the boilers fixed, but that was, they were able to work that out. So we, try to minimize the impact on kids, but I just want to thank everybody for their hard work.
That's amazing.
Thank you for that update.
Thank you.
Yeah,
We did
thanks
contact
for
our insurance
being here.
company, just so you know, so that's, it was something, that large.
Sure.
Obviously the ceiling's gonna have to be replaced,
Yeah.
tiles, there's some work.
I was interested in having this on the agenda because I wanted to make sure that the people who were involved in the cleanup and who did such a spectacular job of getting us back online so fast,
Oh,
got our
Yeah.
thank yous.
yeah, absolutely.
It's an
That's
interesting
wonderful.
reminder that even in the face of a pandemic, we don't get a free pass on anything else. We still have
Right.
the regular
Right.
issues to deal with.
That's it.
Yeah.
And that's funny, 'cause that's part of the issue when, with high school where we had the 12 staff members, like that doesn't calculate people who are just sick or who might have had surgery or might have just had a baby, like there's still there's life going on beyond that, so yeah, that is a kind of a constant reminder. The other quick thing I wanted to mention, that I did get some clarity on, is that for our diversity task force, Dan got back to me and said the best thing that we could do is limit the number of board members on that task force to 3. He felt like that way we avoid any questions about a quorum. He didn't feel like that necessarily that anything wrong was done, but at the same time, like why defend something that doesn't necessarily need to be defended? So Joe and I can have a conversation about that offline. But just to kind of give people a sense of that was I told you to come back to you with that.
That makes
Yep.
sense.
Excellent.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't have a lot today, but Interact Club is going to be volunteering at the Dover Soup Kitchen tomorrow, which is always a really fun opportunity to help your community and just meet new people. And they're also going to be doing another letter. So they're going to be writing letters to the residents of the nursing home in Hampton for people who might not have had a lot of company during the holiday season. They're going to be saying messages like Happy New Year, have a good day. And rather than making them all as a group, they're going to be making them at their house, and then a few members are going to be driving around and collecting them all and then dropping them off at the nursing home. And student government is in the process of electing new students to the exec board. And that's all I have.
Very cool.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no correspondence to report on. As regards the committees, both committees have not met since our last meeting. They're scheduled to meet next, Facilities and Finance on the 20th and Education Policy on the 27th. And that brings us to new business. We have a bunch of fine work out of our policy committee to consider tonight. These are, I believe, all first readings, yes?
Yes. Remember the last time we were so happy there was none? So
Yeah.
this balances it off.
Time to pay the piper, as it were.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, may I have a motion, please, with regard to JIC?
I move we approve the first reading and discussion of policy bullying, JICK.
I'll second.
That's Heather. Heather is a second, thank you. So it looks like we've eliminated those paragraphs that had the language, that had some language in it that has since been determined to be unnecessary. Is that true?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And we really kind of fell back more so on kind of the recommendation by MSMA and Drummond and Woodson.
Yeah.
For the recommendation of the
I
policy.
actually have a question about the language in, I think it's paragraph C is based on, subparagraph 2, where it talks about, there's a section that says under Maine law, and this is highlighted text, so I presume this is text that has been added.
This is a change in terminology in Maine law. I believe that happened in the last 12 months, because we had to change the same language in a couple of our other policies as
Okay.
well.
Yep. I have to comment. I actually consulted a sociologist at the University at Albany, SUNY, who also is my daughter, so it's. The first paragraph on sexual orientation, it implies that it's intended to include gender identity and expression, and I suspect that's a problem with the way the law is written, because they are orthogonal.
Yeah.
Something we can take up with Drummond and Woodson, maybe.
Yep. Our guidance counselors, when they looked at this as well, had mentioned that.
Yeah,
When we
Excellent.
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah.
Good, okay. But for now, the law is the law.
Right.
That's what it says. Any other questions or comments about JIC? All in favor? That's 5-0. Thank you. We have a motion on the administrative procedure.
I motion to approve the first reading and discussion of policy bullying administrative procedures, JIC-R.
I'll second.
Was that you, Jen?
Yep.
Okay. Any questions on the procedure? Seems largely to be aimed at the designation of the,
Yeah, we changed the wording of that, absolutely, yep.
yeah. Seems straightforward enough.
Yeah.
Any questions? All in favor? That's 5-0, thank you. And that'll bring us to the report form, E1. May I have a motion, please?
I move we approve the first reading and discussion of policy bullying report form, JICK-E1.
I'll second.
I think that was Heather?
Lisa.
Oh, it was Lisa, sorry. Lisa Flynn, thank you. Doesn't seem to be much to comment on
No.
here.
No.
Okay. All in favor? That's 5-0, thank you.
And basically, the philosophy was, if we're gonna look at it, let's look at it all so we can knock it all down and just, because I think
Yeah.
one of the things we just did, there's a lot of loose ends, we just wanna make sure that we went through everything thoroughly.
Excellent.
Makes sense. And then there's an investigation and response form. May I have a motion on E2, please?
I move to approve first reading and discussion of policy bullying investigation and response form, JICK-E2.
Second.
I think
Lisa.
that was Lisa?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. It's tough with the microphones and the
Yeah.
masks. I'm not getting any directional cues at all. Any questions about this? Similar to the last one, I think,
Same.
right?
That's,
This-
yeah.
Same.
Updated.
Okay, all in favor? That is 5-0.
Ooh, sorry.
And then while we're on the topic of JIC, we have E3, which is our disciplinary and remedial action summary. May I have a motion, please?
I move we approve the first reading and discussion of policy bullying, summary of disciplinary and remedial actions, JIC-E3.
I'll second.
I'm sorry, I was looking down when whoever seconded. That was Heather, thank you.
It was me.
No,
Oh,
it
no,
was
it
Jen.
was Jen?
Yeah.
I guess
Sorry.
we'll say our names. Maybe we'll say our names
Yeah.
when we, yeah.
Yeah, that will help you.
Yeah, that would.
So the major change in this is that we felt like it was important to get notification to the superintendent as soon as we were aware of a bullying situation where this process was happening, whereas
Yeah.
before it was at the end, and we felt like we wanted to get that involved right off the bat.
Yep.
So.
Okay. Questions or comments? All in favor? That's 5, thank you. And we have E4.
I move to approve the first reading and discussion of policy bullying reporting, investigation and intervention resolution process chart, JICK-E4.
I'll second. Lisa.
Lisa, thank you.
We've adapted.
Did we have a flow chart in the past? This seems to be pretty handy.
So-
I thought this was where we were adding copy to superintendent on
this
this
was.
graph.
I was
Yeah.
wondering,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We had,
okay.
part of the issue, I think, is that it was not clear. And so I think now this flow chart allows that clarity. We had one before, but I'm not necessarily sure. So this is part of the reorganization part.
Got it,
So-
okay.
Yep.
Questions? All in favor? That's 5-0.
And that flow chart was much easier to read than the one that
I was
we
gonna
had.
say, this is a pretty cool flow chart.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
good,
Yep.
yeah.
May I have a motion, please, on the use of the security camera system?
I move to approve the first reading and discussion of policy security camera system, ECAD, new policy for adoption by the district.
Is that Heather?
Thank you.
Can I comment quickly
Yes,
on this?
please
So
do.
this really came out of the fact that we have added security cameras to all of our buildings. And so there are periodically times when there may be disciplinary action that takes place, and people kind of come in and say, look, I want to see the footage, or how do we handle that? So we really didn't ever have a policy kind of outlining kind of the legal requirements that we would use in the event we needed to use that. So that's where this came from. In addition, those of you who aren't aware, it was a requirement put in place, I believe, 2 years ago, that all buses that are purchased going forward have video camera systems on all of the buses. So this will be another area where this would be applied as well.
Okay.
So this is new policy for the district. Does this language come from the MSMA or from?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, I think this one came from Drummond and Woodson.
Oh, for Drummond and Woodson,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
And this came out of the conversation that when Ann did the investigation training with us, when Ann Chapman came and did the investigation training with us, this was part of, she said, oh, well, now what does your policy around security camera footage look like? And we said, oh. If you send it to us, we'll know what it looks like. So we don't have it right now, so.
Fair enough. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? 5-0, thank you. And lastly, we have an administrative procedure associated with this. May I have a motion, please?
I move we approve the first reading and discussion of policy security camera system administrative procedure, ECAD-R, which is a new policy for adoption by the district.
Heather,
I
thank you.
second.
Heather, second, thank you. This is the procedure.
Yes.
And it looks uncontroversial. Anybody from the policy committee have any comment on this, or?
No, this was new as well.
No? Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? 5-0, thank you very much.
Recordings are only retained for 30 days. That's interesting. Kind of arbitrary. I suppose if there's gonna be an issue with something, it would come up quickly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So,
typically,
And-
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything there's an issue with, I'm assuming would be retained, obviously.
Yeah.
For the length of the investigation.
Right. Okay, I think we've heard from everyone who's left here tonight. I don't want anybody to feel like they have to give us any other updates unless someone wants to. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
It's all you, Heather.
Tony?
Mhm.
Okay. Are we good?
A motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
All in favor? 5-0, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.